I used to do a white build every year here on the channel, but it's been over 2 years since we put together one of these machines. That changes right now. Looking to grab Windows at a crazy discount? Head over to scdkey.com at the links below and use promo code BPS25 at checkout to score a sweet deal on Windows 10, Windows 11, and Microsoft Office. Once you've completed your purchase, just click over to your user center, hit the green button to view your code, copy and paste it into your Windows activation settings, and away you go. Check out SCDKey at the links in the video description for Windows, Office, games, and more. Alright, let's get right down to it. This build has been in the works basically since I came back from CES in early January. While I was there, I saw a GPU that would end up being the final piece of the puzzle for the 2023 white build. And since then, I've gone about putting together the rest of the roster to come up with what you see in front of you here. So we might as well start out with what I think might just be the best looking 40 series graphics card, and that's this RTX 4070 Ti Aero from Gigabyte. The 4070 Ti certainly wasn't the best received release from Nvidia, having come out 2 months ago to strictly mediocre reviews. Now, I and many others spoke critically more about Nvidia's initial intentions with this card, which was to name it a 4080, rather than of its gaming acumen. Had it come out strictly named RTX 4070 at the appropriate price point, I think it would have been a fine addition to the Ada Lovelace product line, as it performs on average close to the RTX 3090 Ti. This white version is super slick looking, and the cooler is overbuilt for the expected power draw, so I anticipate strong performance and low noise. The hardest part of any white build in 2023 is going to be the motherboard. There used to be a good number of options even as recently as a few years ago, with companies like MSI even coming out with boards that had completely white PCBs along with white or silver componentry. Now the best options are going to be from NZXT, as they offer their boards with this all-white shielding. This is the N7B650E motherboard, with support for AMD's 7000 series of chips. I haven't put in any serious time with B650E yet, but to be honest, anytime we can get a product which offers basically identical functionality to the top-end product for a slightly cheaper price, I'm all for it. B650E boards only suffer if you plan on utilizing more than 36 PCIe lanes, which for this build and most gaming systems in general is not a problem. For memory in our all-white system, of course we're going to need some white DIMMs. So for that, I turn to Corsair and their Vengeance RGB DDR5 memory. This is a 6000 speed kit in white, and while sometimes getting 4 sticks to operate at full expo speeds on AMD platforms is tricky, we'll do our best. The processor we're going to go with today has very recently changed. Originally, I wanted to slot in the AMD Ryzen 9 7900, the non-X CPU that consumes less power and runs cooler than the 7900X. I thought that would be a really nice pairing with the 4070 Ti. However, at the time of shooting, NZXT hasn't published any recent BIOS updates to support it. So instead, we'll be using the full-fat version of the same chip and just popping it into eco mode in Ryzen Master, which should essentially accomplish the same thing. To cool our 7900X non-X, NZXT sent over their 280mm cooler that also contains one of the edgier letters of the alphabet, the Z63 RGB. I'll be honest, with the way AMD has designed the boost behavior of these AM5 chips, I would be hesitant to use anything less than a 360mm AIO if the plan wasn't to go with eco mode on the 7900X, but with that being said, the Z63 should be perfect for the 7900 non-X, which is what we're effectively simulating here. The case of choice today is going to be NZXT's new H9 Elite. The fish tank type approach for case construction is really taking hold throughout the industry, and the evolution has been interesting, as we are now seeing more manufacturers figuring out ways to make the front corner much more of a continuous viewing experience. Additionally, NZXT has slapped a piece of tempered glass at the top, replacing what is traditionally a vented mesh panel. I did have some concerns about this, however NZXT's solution is to offset the fan and radiator mounting to allow airflow to be redirected out of the rear. It'll be interesting to see how this performs. Other than that, the H9 Elite is a striking looking case that also comes with 3 F-Series Duo fans and a built-in RGB and fan controller. We'll also be using a vertical GPU mounting bracket to show off the 4070 Ti Aero. I wanted to populate the rest of the case with the same F-Series Duo fans, but unfortunately they just don't really exist anywhere for sale right now, and NZXT themselves don't have any that they could send me. So we're going with the non-Duo versions of the same fans. This just means that there isn't lighting on the back side, but they are otherwise identical. Supplying our power today is going to be Be Quiet's new Dark Power 13. It's 80 plus titanium efficient and ATX 3.0, meaning you get a 600 watt 12VH power connector right on board. Be Quiet's power supplies have always been top notch, and I doubt this one will be any different. Time to get down to business. Let's get this bad boy put together. So our all-white system turned out to not be all white. And while that's certainly an annoyance and something that I want to talk about in a little more detail in a second, the rest of the build process, actually putting all the components in the case, running the system, gaming on it, cooling performance, everything else was pretty much top-notch, and I don't think I really had anything to complain about at all. So yeah, let's talk about that memory and why the Corsair Vengeance DIMMs are actually stuck in rainbow unicorn mode and not white like they should be. So NZXT doesn't make their own motherboards. They customize a board that is provided by another OEM. In this case, this is an ASRock board that is now NZXT branded and has the NZXT armor and all of the built-in functionality of NZXT CAM. So the problem that I was actually running into had to do with what software could talk to these Corsair DIMMs and make them change color. And I had a hell of a time trying to figure this out. NZXT CAM itself does not see these DIMMs. I cannot control the color with NZXT CAM. So I tried NZXT CAM Beta. I tried Asus Aura. I tried ASRock's Polychrome RGB, since this is actually an ASRock board. I tried Corsair iCUE. I even tried OpenRGB, which, as the name would suggest, is an open platform RGB control software that is supposed to be able to basically see and control almost anything. None of these pieces of software that I tried could see or control the lighting on the memory modules at all. I even went into the BIOS on the motherboard to see if there was any way to control it there, because other manufacturers like Gigabyte have their RGB control software as a subheader inside of the BIOS, and you could kind of play with things there, although the functionality is pretty basic compared to a Windows app that you might use. But again, no luck. I was so frustrated that I rummaged through my available parts that I have here in the office to see if I have anything else that could either be controlled by the software or was just a white DIMM. And unfortunately, I didn't have any other parts that I could use that would look even remotely good in here. So I just left the white DIMMs in place, and yes, they are rainbow. That sucks, but honestly, it doesn't really ruin anything. The system still performs well. It just aesthetically, it looks a little weird with everything else being white. Now, continuing to speak about the memory, you might notice that one of the DIMMs, the leftmost one, is actually pushed ever so slightly to the right. And the reason for that is because there's no clearance between the cooler's tubes and the memory modules themselves. Now, you might just say, well, just rotate it, turn it around, put it in a different direction. The problem that I was facing is that the wires that come out of the Z63 RGB cooler have to be oriented straight up in order for the USB cable to reach the USB header down below. And if I had spun the cooler in any other direction, there wouldn't be enough slack to do that. So I was kind of stuck orienting this cooler in this position, having the tubes on the right, and unfortunately causing a little bit of interference with the DIMMs. This didn't seem to impact their functionality at all, and I don't really have any concerns. It's just that the spacing of the DIMMs now looks a little bit off. But with that being said, how did the system perform and what were the thermals like? Check out the gaming benchmarks. These will all run at 1440p and ultra settings. I did not turn on any ray tracing features. However, with a card like the 4070 Ti, that is certainly an option. From low to high, we had Metro Exodus at 96 frames per second, and then all the way up to F122 at 205 frames per second. Every game that I fired up here and played a little bit of seemed to play without any issues, played very smoothly, and the graphics looked awesome. Now, jumping back to thermals, because that actually was a concern that I had with this build, considering the way the top glass might potentially block airflow out of the case. Also, I put the fans on the bottom as exhaust as opposed to intake as they probably should be. I did this exclusively for aesthetic reasons. This build is going to look better if it has the RGB rings of the fans facing into the case, and it kind of replicates what the build would have looked like had I been able to get the F-Series Duo fans instead of the regular F-Series fans. So the bottom now is oriented as exhaust as opposed to intake the way it should be, and I didn't know how that was going to impact thermals. Honestly, as it turns out, this system runs pretty cool. I saw CPU temperatures averaging around 61 degrees Celsius and maxing out around 71 degrees Celsius, and GPU temperatures averaging about 52 and maxing out around 56. So those are certainly very acceptable thermals, and I think that really owes to the chip being in eco mode and not pulling as much wattage and boosting up as high as it might otherwise. All in all though, if the biggest issue that I ran into is that I can't change the color of my memory, I think we did a pretty good job here. The H9 Elite is an awesome looking case, and I was more and more impressed the more I built in it. The backside has some serious cable management features and a lot of room to store excess cables and route things appropriately. The main chamber of the case looks amazing with the tempered glass wraparound and tempered glass on the top, and has plenty of room if you wanted to do a custom loop in here or have an extra large graphics card. You don't run into any issues. So what do you guys think of the 2023 white build, or mostly white build as we have here today? I think it came out great. I do wish the memory was white, of course, but you know, you can't have it all. Let me know down below in the comments what you might have changed about this build or how you might have put it together. Also, don't forget to get subscribed to the channel if you are not already. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.